Hey, everybody. I'm putting my ears in. This is Devin with Writing Daily. And every day we talk about writing, how to write better, how to write more often, how to complete our projects, how to put ourselves out into the universe as writers. I'm so glad that you're with me today. And whether you're joining me live or not, please consider liking this page so I know that I am on the right track. Anyway, we're going to be covering a big topic today, and that topic is dialogue. The reason why this is coming up because I've actually been reading because I love to read. I was reading something online that it was a story, and the how do I put this? The dialogue was terrible. I don't know if that's an okay thing to say, because I'm sure that's quite possible. Somebody may be looking at me and my dialogue one day and saying, "Wow, great guy, terrible dialogue." But you know, you have to take a stance, and sometimes we have to talk about things that are challenging, even if we don't consider ourselves to be the perfection in that field. Although I think I write pretty good genre, and I'll tell you why I think I do. But let me tell you about the things that I was reading that I thought didn't work in dialogue. And I think, by the way, dialogue is just basically a conversation. You're using quotation marks. It's a scene usually where at least two people are conversing with each other, having an opinions, exchanging ideas, etc. And it could be anything. So the dialogue that I was reading, and I don't want to get too much in the specifics of the story, but their story is going in one direction and the dialogue is taking it in a different direction, which isn't useful, I think, across the board, because it's not necessarily informing the story or informing who the characters are in relationship to the story. What they're doing is, so the dialogue was really very much about, hey, can you pass the coffee? Okay, I will pass the coffee to you now. Would you like sugar in your coffee? And well, no, I take cream in my coffee. And so the dialogue centers around coffee. So what I didn't like about it when I thought about it, and first off, it actually went on for like a long page. There was no break in the dialogue. It was just people talking about coffee, and the story had nothing to do with coffee. And I didn't, by the end of that page, didn't feel as though I had any insight to who either character was that would help enrich the story. And I think ultimately that's what dialogue does, is kind of allow you to have insight of who the characters are, right? So you can take away something from them. So when they're caught in situations, you have a better sense of who they are and how they're going to react and how they're going to respond. And I think that's it's crucial. And that's why we want to have dialogue, so we can we don't have to describe everything that the character is doing. The character is going to say something. And I think this is true regardless of whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction. I think, the idea of choosing a quote, even if you're just choosing a single quote, let's say for a magazine article, you want to make sure that it's an interesting quote, it's a fascinating quote, it's a quote that's compelling or controversial. And we talked a little bit about writing controversially yesterday. But I think in this case, what I was experiencing is that we're taking a mundane action, which is, hey, pass the sugar, I'm having a cup of coffee, and we're not playing anything further upon it. We're just kind of staying in a room where somebody's having a cup of coffee, and it's something that we've seen 10,000 times. So there's nothing interesting. And it was, for me, an immediate way that it wasn't that it was like, I have a moral objection to this, so I'm being lost in the story. It was that this isn't interesting in a significant way, and now I'm no longer participating in the story. So I think, obviously as writers, can we just keep writing fascinating, interesting things, sentence after sentence, paragraph after paragraph? I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lull in most books I read to some degree or another, but usually an overriding premise or something else will keep me glued through the points that are lulls. And I think some of those lulls are important for, expressing detail and information that's going to be useful to the reader at a later point in the story. I think for dialogue, this is also true, but what that means is you can derail the story with bad dialogue. You can derail your reader's interest with bad dialogue. So I've written down a few things. I haven't used the cards in a while, but I'm going to use them now. So So here's some of my personal rules as to what I do when I think about using dialogue. So first off, how does it impact the story? You know, I wasn't sure if that was a question mark or an exclamation point, so I made it sort of like a dual punctuation mark. So what does that mean? How does it impact the story? In other words, are we talking about things that are going to be useful to the reader as we move further along in the story? Or are we just having dialogue for the sake of dialogue, i.e., the story that I was reading earlier today that was talking about a cup of coffee? So that's part one. Part two, and these are sort of like my four masterful tips in writing better dialogue, is that if you are having a character, I think that you should be modeling it in some way. In other words, find something interesting about that character and create the dialogue. As a matter of fact, I remember having a really interesting conversation with a professor, Alma. Oh, why can't I think of her name? Alma Villanueva. Alma Villanueva. She's a prolific writer, wonderful. She's what she always describes is that her characters will come to her in the shower, and they will talk with her in the shower, and they will let her know whether or not the character is moving in the right direction and saying the right things. And so, on the one hand, when I first heard her say this, I thought, well, that's almost nutty. I think Alma would probably take that as a compliment. But I think the more I've thought about it, I think that's exactly what needs to happen. If you're writing a fiction story, then that character has to be alive for you. And if that character is alive for you, that means we're going to get more authentic dialogue. We're going to get a response from sort of like a real entity. And I think that's crucial. In my case, I covered a lot of territory, and the thing that I had to do in my mind is that anytime I wrote down dialogue, something that my father said to me for a long time ago, I had to make sure that it resonated me in a real way. Like I had to be able to hear my father saying precisely that. Because when you're going back in time, can I remember word for word every single time? No, but what I have to do is I have to set up a guideline where it's like, yes, this is what my father says, and this is how he says it. And that's an important component. So when I have a character speaking, or when I'm writing something that's true, I need to make sure that it's true across the board. That means I have to hear it in a true way. I have to hear my father's voice saying it in only the way my father would say it, and that's what I get to write down. I don't get to put words in his mouth just because it's a convenient thing to do, or it will enhance the story in some sort of a wackadoodle way that I think is useful. I think the most useful thing to do is really get into the essence of who that character is and have them say the things that they would say. And I think this is true whether you're talking about fiction or nonfiction. Okay, the next thing is say it out loud. Whatever that line of dialogue is that say it the way the person would intended to have said it, and hear it. Like I think our ears are really underrated. We want to hear what our character saying and the way that they're saying it, because not only that, sometimes when we hear a character saying something, there's little embellishments in the voice that go a long way to informing who this character is. How do we see that character saying it? So if there are certain pauses, I think we point that out for the reader. If there is certain, and here's my last tip is gestures. So one of the things that probably bothered me most, and this is something that I do, so perhaps that's the reason why it bothers me, is that I'm capable of just like, let's just have all the dialogue. And that, I suppose, is fine in some circumstances. I think more often than not that the reader needs some sort of an organic break within the dialogue, because it isn't, just pages upon pages of people talking. It's that people are doing things while they're talking. So what I like to make sure that we include are gestures. So that means when it becomes appropriate, maybe they're scratching their nose, or they're turning around, or they're putting away dishes, or there's some sort of an organic pause in the dialogue where it's not just ping-ponging back and forth endlessly. They're having organic communication just as we would in any other dialogue. So when we're seeing and hearing and saying what our characters are saying out loud, it all brings it into sort of like, here's the manifestation for us as writers. Does it pass our snuff? Does it cover the bases? And so we want to include these gestures, if nothing else, just to break up the back and forth banter between two people. Because I think it's normal that somebody's putting away a dish or somebody's doodling on a napkin while we're communicating. It's what we do regular. And so obviously the more human we can bring our characters to the page, the more likely our readers are going to be able to identify and believe them and love them and all that kind of good stuff. So that's what I've got today on dialogue. As a matter of fact, just a quick rundown. We talked about gestures. We talked about saying our dialogue out loud to make sure that it rolls off of our tongue clearly and in the way that our characters would want them to. Model it after somebody. I mean, it was easy for my father and my mother in my book because they're both a little bit nutty and a little bit fun. And so getting their dialogue right was, I think, crucial and a fun part of it for me as the writer, but I think it will be really important for the reader. And does the dialogue, align itself with the story in a way that will offer the reader more information and be useful down the road for the ultimate climax of the story, however it is that you are telling. So anyway, this is Devin. We are going to be here for more Writing Daily. And as always, please make sure you click the like button or the wow button, whether you're watching me live or not. If you're interested in my book, 10,000 Miles with My Dead Father's Ashes, please do go to devingallaudet.com/dad for more information and join me because I'm going to be doing some giveaways. We're setting that up this week. And that's what I've got for today. So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys again real soon. And that's it. Have a great day.